Adonai Eloheinu, Melech HaOlam, Asher Natan Torah.
Amen.
Praised are you, Jehovah Elohim, King of the universe, who gives us the Torah of truth and the good news of salvation to his people Israel, and to all the peoples through his Son, Yeshua the Messiah, our Lord. Amen.
Opening up to Devarim, Deuteronomy 22. About halfway through that chapter. And you can try to finish it in that chapter. Alright, but before we get into that, I just want to ask a kind of random question. Just testing the waters a little bit.
Nothing random about you.
No. No, I'm completely.
Not going to trick us.
Watching us. Yes. Is there anybody who feels like they've been getting the message from Abba to get back into the Word?
Yeah.
Right. Ed, tell you what, raise your hands please if you have been getting that. Okay. All right. I believe God is busy doing something, and let me put it this way. He doesn't want you to coin a phrase from me, right on the coattails of anybody else, but to get to know him personally.
That's right.
Right? Because whatever he's preparing for you to do is requiring that you know his word.
Yes.
Right? So you can distinguish between what's right and wrong. Yeah? What his standard says and what's not. How, whether he likes something or he doesn't. The only way you're going to know that is if you get to know him through his word. Okay? From start to finish, understand what his plan is, understand what his purpose is, but you have to go and you have to do the work to be able to get in it and ask God to reveal to you what you're doing so that you can better be prepared for what's coming. Second question. Has anybody felt maybe over the last 2 weeks a sudden push or influx of distraction and interesting trials and testing? Hands up if you've been going through that. Okay. Take heart.
Thank you.
Not mine, I have mine. I believe, and please test this as always, that your distractions, your trials and your tests, you know, I was reading a portion in Corinthians and it says, you know, rejoice in your trials because it teaches you to trust, it teaches you to rely on God.
Yes.
Okay, so there is this aspect that God might be putting you through a little bit of a water moment where he wants you to hold on to him. My concern is a little bit of where this water is coming from. Okay, I personally believe what Abba showed me was this is a little bit of a push from the enemy. I think he's trying to stop something that's going to happen. And the best way to do that is to shove so much information or so much fear or so much doubt, whether you're in a financial situation, whether you're just so busy you don't know where you're going, and whether you know, it doesn't matter what the distraction is, he's using that distraction to get you off the course of getting to know him better. If God's been telling you to get into his word, to get to know him, and now all of a sudden there's this fluctuation of busyness, and now I have to think or do this and get this done and go there and do this and do that, and you're so focused on that, you're going to miss the calling, you're going to miss what he's called you to do, and he's preparing you for what's coming. Okay, I want you to consider this as maybe Abba is just taking you through sitting on one side of the Jordan, and he says, all right, Deuteronomy, as is the context, is he goes in and he says, well, listen, you're here. You've heard it all said before, but let me tell it to you again. And he reaffirms it. I find it interesting that when God does something, when he's about to do something, he reaffirms covenant. And he meets the person at the need and he goes, all right, this is what I'm about. Do you want it? I believe he's pushing that. And the only way you're going to know what he's about is if you get stuck into that word and you learn and you push and you study and you let him take care of the stuff that's coming against you.
Yeah.
Listen to me carefully. You will not fix this. You will not part these waters by yourself. You're not going to change that. The point is to hold on to him so he can change that.
Yes.
My message to you is this. Get in line. If you are not in or behind him, you're going to get washed away.
Yeah.
Because you're so busy trying to sort out stuff, trying to do stuff that you're walking away from the instruction that he gave you. Now please, go and test, go and pray, go and do what you need to do. Okay? But this distraction is real. This push to get you so fixated, tracing your own tail, trying to solve your own issues, is what's going to keep you away from the blessing that he's got prepared for you.
Yeah.
But you've got work to do. You've got to get into the Word. You've got to spend time with him. You've got to get prepared. If you don't, you won't be ready. Okay? It says, in Scripture, be prepared to give an account of the things you hope for at any time. If you are able to stand and they look at you and they go, why do you hope in God? Why do you trust in God? Why do you do what you do? You need to be able to quote him, not man. If you have not been here for a while, this is why I read the Word. Is because I don't want you to say, Vince said, I want you to say, no, it's written, this is what God said, and this is what we're doing. Me, I'm pushing to ask the question, if God said this, what are you doing about it? I will help you any way I can to give you historical or cultural background, or anything that God has taught me and showed me and how those things have sort of impacted and given us a fuller picture of. But at the end of the day, it's what you're doing with God's instruction. And make no mistake, he's not going to stand there and go, oh, okay, good job. You followed Vince really nicely. It's not about me. I'm going to stand there by myself and he's going to go, Vince, what did you do with my instruction? I did this. And then he's going to ask you, what did you do with my instruction? Where's your focus? Where is your heart? And do not let your hearts get troubled for the things you're going through right now. If you seem a bit overwhelmed, if you seem a bit all of sorts, if you seem a bit scared, God was not surprised about what you're facing. I promise you, he knew about it long before you knew about it. But he's already taking care of it. Okay? Uncle Jeff, you want to say?
Yeah. I'd like to get something. Last year I was given instruction to make it and wear them. And I'll tell you something, since I've put it on, I've said this with Brenda this morning, it feels like I'm looking backwards and I've shed a skin. It's an old, dirty, tired, stained, yuck skin. But it's behind me. It's just amazing. Since I followed his instruction, it's just, that's part of, I think, where you're coming from as well, for me personally, for my journey. It's just, I just have to share this. It's just, I don't know, it's just, it freaks me out.
It's about taking on what he has called you to do and do what he's called you or told you to do to get back to that essence so that you can get prepared. God is telling you to do this for a reason. He doesn't just say, oh, study my word so you can be more pious and a bigger theologian than anybody else.
No.
Okay? These are the words that get you to know him. Every instruction, every mitzvah is, how do I put this? A way of discerning what he likes and what he doesn't like, what he loves and what he hates, so that you can better know the character of God. to take away from that, you nullify what he likes and what he doesn't like. If your husband says to you, I really dislike black coffee, and you keep on giving him black coffee, he will start to think you don't like him. No, just ignore that. It's just full of nonsense. He doesn't really mean it. Actually, he does. He wrote it down. He's preserved it. He's kept it here for you, so that it would go well with you. Because where you are with him, that's where you're safe. Listen to me. If you are playing half foot out, these waters are pretty strong, guys. I'm asking you nicely. I'm pleading with you. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know where your head's at. I don't know what you're facing. But I tell you one thing. You better get in line. He's preparing you for something. And for me to see you fulfill your calling, that means my job's done. I want to push you into what God has called you, who He's called you to be. Bottom line, I want to push you to the point that you will be so in God that people will not know when your word starts and His word ends. He's calling you for a reason. If you need clarification, go back to Abba, go and pray. Go ask him why. All I know is I'm asking the question because what he showed me a couple of weeks ago, I've been testing, and the more I'm hearing about just little things and what we've been busy facing, what we've been going through. It's parting waters, man.
Yeah.
But we have to get in line. There's a calling, there's authority, and it's only when you're in line with that can you move forward. Okay? So if I'm saying anything that's touching your heart right now that maybe Allah has been talking to you about, just go back to what He's told you to do, alright? Get back into the Word. Okay? Alright. So last week we discussed quite in-depthly the fun of Sitziot. Does anybody have any questions about that? Are you good? Alright, hopefully we answered a few things there. Okay. Tzitzit, hard scraps, wines, forfeited. What's up? Twisted cords. And as in true Deuteronomy fashion, like I said, each one of these mitzvahs are interconnected, right? But you go into this place of, remember, we like to make like the separation in the way the law has put together. We like to use words like civil law, moral law, holiness law, okay, to try and get into subsections of Torah. Okay, this is just case in point, one of the things where I don't believe that exists, because God never uses those terms Himself. He gives you a Torah, which is an instruction, not a law. And He says, this is me, all of it. Okay? And the 10 Commandments, in a sense, or the 10 words are headings of everything else that you find that you come through. Okay? But here He goes in from, make for yourself twisted corners or the four corners of your garments to wrap around yourself. And then He goes into verse 13. So, where sits it? And then He goes, if a man marries a woman, has sexual relations with her, and then having come to dislike her, brings false charges against her and defames her character by saying, I married this woman, but when I had intercourse with her, I did not find any evidence that she was a virgin. Okay. So we go from where sits it to case of virginity proof. Okay, these things kind of go a little bit left and right, and sometimes God has got a plan. Trust in that, okay? This is a mitzvah regardless of whether we want to get into this or not. I don't know if you want to close your children's ears for a bit, but we're going to get there. It says, then the girl's father and the mother are to take the evidence of the girl's virginity to the leaders of the town at the gate. Evidence of virginity?
30 sheets.
Normally the sheet.
Yep.
They would keep that. Okay? So that if someone would come back and say, and understand how heavy this is. What would be the repercussions if she was not? Say now, worst case scenario, he says, she wasn't, and he publicly shames her. What happens?
She never marry again. She becomes defiled.
In many cases. Who does she belong to then? Does she belong to the man?
She goes back to her father's house.
She goes back to her father's house and she lives out her life as what? Almost a widow. It is very rare in the case that a woman who has been shamed like that will ever get remarried. Maybe she's 17. Maybe she's 22. So he decides that he dislikes her. And he brings a false charge against her that will affect her life forever. Now remember, in the beginning of these portions, God is now, it's funny that he sort of mentions lifting up the woman here, where in no other ancient code of the time is there anything protecting females. So no, you don't just treat them like objects. These are my children and I will uphold the standard. You will protect them. Okay? He says, the girl's father will say to the leaders, verse 16, I'll let my daughter marry this man, but he hates her. So he has brought false charges that he didn't find evidence of her virginity, yet here is the evidence of the daughter's virginity. And they will lay the cloth down, or cloth before the town leaders. The leaders of that town are to take the man, punish him, fine him 2.5 pounds of silver shekels, which they will give to the girl's father, because he has publicly defamed the Virgin of Israel. She will remain his wife, and he is forbidden from divorcing her as long as he lives. Now,
How would he overnight stop liking her?
well, remember, you're dealing with, okay, well, we can actually, to the time of Yeshua, maybe he found it something prettier.
In one night.
Huh?
Where was he?
You've got to ask the questions, right?
At the wedding.
Yeah.
I mean,
See,
presumably they knew each other. They went under the chuppah together. They pledged to one another.
Yes.
They came to an agreement. And then they went to bed.
But isn't there a year
And then in the
also?
morning, he no longer likes her.
Well, I don't think it was as thing. I think it was not just one night in that sense, because the father would have to take the sheets and he would go and keep them in a safe place, and then he says, oh no, she was not.
Okay, so maybe it was when he got her cooking skills or whatever down the road.
So it's like, oh, you know, she really doesn't know how to do it. That's possible. Guys, when we go into when you go back into the Mishnah writings, now remember I said to you, hey, some of the stuff is good and some of it is terrible. Okay? When you go into the Mishnah, which is the oral traditions, you will get down to a place where they will allow you to divorce your wife for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, the most fun one, which is easy to point out to show you the heart of what's going on, is burnt food. Sorry, it's been real, you burnt my soup, you can leave now. I obviously disagree with that slightly, because when God says he has joined two people to make one flesh, burnt soup doesn't separate one flesh, I'm sorry. It might singe your flesh a little bit, but depends how much you want to push that button. It's not going to get to the place. You should not act out in hate. He's showing this man's dislike, maybe his motives. It is a very strong word that he uses, that you come out, he has hated my daughter.
And if this is about her virginity, then does he not, well, my version says, to test her, because there is no evidence and he's thinking,
Well, that's the thing.
There's
That's
something
the case of, you will bring the evidence to, and if he has defamed a virgin of Israel.
but then there is still evidence, so he still detests her.
Yes. So he's trying to pull a fast one, hoping Daddy didn't keep the sheep. If I have case, then I can leave her with a clear conscience. How easy is it to walk away from what God said? I've instituted a holy union between man and a woman. And because one day you turn around and you dislike her, you use whatever you can to bring shame upon her when the problem is you. Instead of dealing with his heart, he's trying to shift it onto her. And God steps in and he gives an instruction saying, you will investigate it, you will bring the proof, and if he is found to be lying, this is the penalty. This isn't just a smack on the wrist, oh sorry, I was. Hello, you were there when you consummated it. I'm pretty sure you saw the sheets. So what are you really saying? I just want to get rid of her. And God in his love and his mercy protects those. And you will pay a penalty. Silver. What was silver again for?
Prayer of redemption.
Redeeming. You have shamed her publicly. You have brought her to a public court. You have brought public charges against her. You don't get to say, sorry, I'm mistaken, and walk away. Oh, and by the way, that woman that you dislike so much, if you ever try and divorce her again, just understand, Abba's holding you accountable. Now we stop and we think, why would God put this woman in a marriage with a guy who detests her? Remember, in the culture in the time, it is worse for her to be shamed. Her father's house would be shamed. She would be shamed.
But she didn't like him either anymore.
Well, I don't think she'd be very happy with him.
No, for sure.
I would watch my soap if I was him.
Yes,
It's like, I thought you were gone and then you were here forever. I didn't really mean it, honey bun. Your life will be very, very, very difficult. But what he's saying is, don't think for a second that you can go out and publicly shame someone and get away with it.
Yeah.
I'm holding you accountable. I'm protecting the weaker.
Yes.
And I will hold that standard against you. And don't think for a second that if, remember, you're talking about a society that is governed by God's instruction here. If he in any way, shape or form brings in any sort of abusive relationship, she has every right to go to daddy. Daddy has every right to go to the council. They have every right to go to the Sanhedrin. And there's some serious penalties that come. Okay? This isn't just a, oh, well, you get stuck in an unhappy marriage. God's holding the man accountable for something that he's trying to do. Okay? It's a very interesting case.
Side note on this, the penalty would possibly be twice the bride price.
I think you'd have to do some calculations because remember the price he paid to have her rivaled what we pay for a house today. So your wife, your investment of 1.5 million rand. Or you want to pay the 2 million rand bride price? I'll tell no, okay. So you don't just get the bling. You don't get to drop 35k and walk in there with a diamond, bro. You've got to come with 4 bedrooms and double garage and 2 bathrooms and saying, ta-da! And most of that goes to her dad.
Oh, yay.
Remember, she gets a little portion of that bride price that she wears. Actually, they take little, you'll see it in ancient pictures, they have little coins, they drill little holes in it, and her veil, right, actually has these coins running around and all the way around. That's the only thing she takes into the marriage that she can actually hold. That's hers, her own possession. That part of that bride price to remind you that you were someone came to you and they said, my life is not complete because I need you and I will invest this amount of money to have you. See, today we've gotten to the case, well, you give them a ring, they say I do. If you get that far, most of the time you just live together and you kind of have all the benefits of being married without actually being married. And you think that that's going to be okay. And meanwhile, it's just going to lead you down a road that you don't want to go down. We have many exciting stories about when people get into that situation. Now they're dealing with spousal agreements and children who don't know where they are and all the rest of it, which is not a good situation. But you're sitting in a place where we now can go to CNA and we can buy a pack of divorce certificates not just one, but two, but a pack of 100, and you can sign it yourself and you can lodge it yourself. But don't worry, if you don't want to be there anymore, just leave. It's okay. It doesn't matter what you do to the other person. You're unhappy, it's all about you. But what people don't understand, when you get married, it's no longer I, it is us. It is not what am I going to do about this or how am I going to do this, it's how are we going to do this. How are we going to establish godliness in our house? How are we going to raise our kids? How are we going to deal with this situation? And this is an I mentality. I hate her, I don't like her, I want to get rid of her. If you stop to think what it would do to that person and to that shame of the family, in a culture where someone is divorced is shamed, what did you do wrong? He left you, he chased you out. Obviously you're the problem. Be very careful. God steps up here and he says, not on my watch. If you think you're going to get away with it, he's going to hold you accountable. And that should send a shudder down your spine because it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of God. Okay? He doesn't let you get away with it. You pay a price and you sit with it. And you will never be allowed to shame her as long as she lives. Verse 20. But if the charge is substantiated, that evidence for the girl's virginity could not be found, then they are to lead the girl to the door of her father's house, and the men of her town will stone her to death, because she has committed in Israel the disgraceful act of being a prostitute while in her father's house. In this way you will put an end to such wickedness among you. Rough, right? Why?
Stumbling stone to other men.
Stumbling stone to other men? What else, Richard?
No, not take that chance. Oh, you're going to get caught and you get killed for it,
Well, you should.
unless it's in a field.
Yeah. Yeah, you read the rest of the portion, right? God is holding Israel accountable. He said, you can't do this by yourself. What is going on behind closed doors? What are you doing? Are you protecting? Remember, the stakes are high. If you were supposed to be reflecting God and showing them the sanctity of marriage, showing them the relationship, remember, marriage is the thing that he uses to relay the type of relationship he wants between his bride and him. If you don't get this right, you pervert that. So what is the options? We go to the fertility cult side. And let's see what the Canaanites and these boykies were up to. How did they treat the sanctity of the marriage bed? That's optional. Okay? You would go in onto a public round altar. You go to a place like Megiddo in Israel, and you will see one of these altars uncovered. And it would be the time a priest would come out. He would maybe get a priestess from Asherah could come out, a priest of Baal, and they would come up, and nice ceremony. They would start worshipping on the altar, and then you grab whoever and whatever is around you. Animals are optional. It's okay. And you would do this as an act of worship. And then, if something really serious happened, you would take the offspring and you could go and sacrifice them as well. But don't worry, we're only dealing with how we feel about this mitzvah. Always God trying to show them something, not to get confused between what's going on there and their harlotry. Acting like that, skewing, perverting what he has made to be holy, making it common, and then he's starting to prepare them already. If I take it so seriously, just between you defiling not only your father's name, what were you doing when you were underneath his care? But now you bring shame to the man who has believed that he was coming into the situation that he was going to get a virgin of Israel. This is what he was promised, and what he got was not. Let me ask you the question. How little do you think of yourself to be able not to give yourself to the man fully? You see, we get to a place where worth isn't even in this thing, but I tell you that God sees more worth in how you present yourself to your husband. Because as a perfect, unblemished bride, we will be presented to Christ. Are you performing the harlot?
Just a question. So what happens when the spectrum is reversed and it's the man that's unfaithful?
It gets to that a little later. You're stoning and stoning, bro. Those are your choices. Okay? God takes it very seriously because this is an image, and again, it comes down to the intimacy that a husband and wife share. And the best way I can describe it is this. When you see people that have been married for a really, really long time, when they look across the room, they can have a conversation without saying a word. The man knows when he's in trouble by the look in his wife's eye. It's time to leave, boys. Why? Don't turn around. I can feel it. She's looking at me, isn't she? I'm innocent. Right? I've seen it happen and played out in I've had the privilege of seeing this played out, Uncle Bill and Uncle Tish. They would sit there and then they would be at a braai and there'd be like 40 people in between them. They would look at each other across the room and then they would go, okay, it's time to leave. My wife's tired. How do you know? She's over there. No, I can see. Thank you very much, love you, bye. And he would lovingly go up to his wife and he says, baby, it's time to go. And she goes, yes. And then they would off they go. Although one story he shared with us is they were sitting in a car and he goes, you know what I think? And then she said, yes, exactly, I think we should do that. And he said, but you don't know what I was saying. You were going to say this, this, and this, and this. That's exactly what I was going to say. And you get into this intimacy where you're literally reading each other's thoughts, looking at each other. You can see when that person is angry, you can see them when other people are completely oblivious. That is the sort of intimacy God is giving you as a picture between Him and you. When you can hear in the tone if there's something wrong. How many of you have been in a relationship long enough to know that fine is not a good response? Or the dreaded words, we need to talk. When we need to talk comes out, most men go cold. What did I do? What did I forget? And what do I need to start apologizing for now? Start making jokes. The beating will be less.
I should laugh at you while she's beating.
Right? What I'm saying is this. You will get to a place of intimacy, and that's what He wants with you and Him. Now, if you are going to take that and you're going to stomp it on the ground and you're not even going to see worth in yourself to be able to present yourself because you love Him as something that is perfect, pure, and holy. You will not even consider shaming your father because it's what you want, because you're lusting in a way. How much worth do you have in yourself? And it's an easy thing to use it for the ladies, but it's equally as easy to use it for the men. What do you want to present your bride? You want to give her a broken little spook and pluck scenario of, well, you know, I promise you'll be the last one. Or you're going to tell her you will be the only one. Now you tell me your father's heart. Are you starting to understand how serious he sees this? With such an in-depth love. And he says, I've given you this union as an understanding for how I want you to act and who you are to me. And you will defile that bed for what? For lust. The whole place will come out and they will stone him. Remember how stoning is done? How do you stone somebody?
Throw him off the cliff and then
What do you do first?
you tie him up.
You tie their hands and their feet, and you throw them, you try to land them on their head, so they get knocked out, and then you take a stone.
Yes, it's not
How big are the stones? Are you talking about stone?
big.
Whatever you can carry. And you get one shot. Notice he doesn't say the leaders are responsible for this. The town is responsible for this. You as a community are being held accountable of what's going on in your community. So who's holding you accountable here? Others holding you accountable. If you know of situations where people are doing this and you have not spoken out, there is one among us here who has acted in this way and they've kept it quiet. What happens if you were one and you were the guy and you were never found out and you were told to pick up a stone? There she is. Maybe it was your lust that caused it. Anybody taking these mitzvahs lightly? You will shame your father, you will shame a marriage, you will break people's houses. For what? Because you've got a scratch that needs itching. Well, itching that needs scratching. But there's cream for both, so don't worry about it. You need to focus on what Abba is talking about. You need to get into the place where you see yourself as something that has self-worth. You need to understand the sanctity of what God said. And you need to be able to remember that you're upholding a standard that the world will see. You know, one of my prayers is when people look into this fellowship, and this is why we went into this marriage course, is that when people see these marriages that are happening in here, they see God. Because the difference between a worldly marriage and people that are living in church that are married, and I'm not just saying in church, I'm saying in Jewish houses and all the rest of it, the general believing standpoint is when people look at people's marriages in fellowships, in churches, in synagogues, in shuls, and the world, it's the same thing. So what benefit do you have? I don't even see peace in your home. It looks exactly like the guys outside. There's as much divorce going on as what's going on outside. And you're telling me you guys have the monopoly on the holy standpoint because God made it? Well, you're not making it look like that. When it comes to marriage, God is serious. Okay. He says, I will put an end to such wickedness among you. If a man is found sleeping with a woman who has a husband, both of them must die. The man who went to bed with a woman and went to bed with woman and the woman too. In this way you will expel such wickedness from Israel. Again, I will point you back to fertility cults. If a girl who is a virgin is engaged to a man and another man comes upon her in town and has sexual relations with her, you are to bring them both out to the gate of the city and stone them to death. The girl because she didn't cry for help there in the city, and the man because he has humiliated his neighbor's wife. In the way you will put an end to such wickedness among you. But if a man comes upon an engaged girl out in the countryside and the man grabs her and has relations with her, then only the man who has had intercourse with her is to die. Why?
Because no one will hear her cry.
Right. So if in the city you don't cry out, are you really that upset that it's happening? Or are you just trying to cover yourself up now because you've been caught? I always find it interesting that God includes all this stuff in you. You will do nothing to the girl because she has done nothing deserving death. The situation is like the case of the man who attacks his neighbor and kills him. For he is found her in the countryside, and the engaged girl cried out, but there was no one to save her. Notice he says engaged. What does your translation say? Anything different?
Engaged.
Engaged. She is as good as married. She is betrothed. She belongs to another. It is not for you to take. Doesn't matter how much you want it. It is not yours. You have not negotiated bride price. You've not gone to the father and say, hey, by the way, thank you, old man, for investing the last 20 years of your life, or 14 or 15 or 17 years of your life, making sure she was clothed, prepared, taught well, all of those things, you know, but don't worry, she looks good. It's a funny thing to think that a family invests so much into their children. Years and years and years of love and building up and teaching and guiding and lifting and building. For some little person who doesn't care about the family, doesn't care about what's going on, just to go, well, I want what I want, get out of my way. If you guys are not married, let me give you a little bit of advice. You don't just marry the person, you marry the family.
What happens to the woman in the countryside when she can't scream out and then she doesn't get put to death, but the money does? I mean, then she's not a virgin anymore to...
I think there are cases, obviously, where if someone would come to her, they would have evidence to say, look, she's not a virgin, but this is why. It's not that she was playing the harlot, it was because someone had taken her. And it wouldn't, obviously it's a bad thing, but it wouldn't be as shameful as someone who was put away. Okay? It's protecting these people from shame, but don't put yourself in situations where you shouldn't be. We get so stuck on this, man. I think this sort of thing, yeah, let's not go there. All right. We found her in the countryside, and the engaged girl cried out, but there was no one to save her. Verse 28, if a man comes upon a girl who is a virgin, but she is not engaged, and he grabs her and has relations with her, and they are caught in the act, then the man who made intercourse with her must give to the girl's father 1.25 pounds of silver shekels, and she will become his wife, because he has humiliated her. He may not divorce her as long as he lives. Okay? The sages have kind of put in a note there that she's obviously willing to marry him. If she is willing. Remember, every time someone would give them an offering and say, in those times, your engagement proposal was a glass of wine. Okay? You would offer it up after the bride price had been negotiated, and you would go up and you would say, take everything that I am. If you take a sip, I give you everything that I am, and by taking a sip, you're saying, I accept everything you are, and I give everything that I am. You don't get to hold back in marriage. I accept everything you are. I take all your strengths. I take all your faults. I take all your brokenness in many cases. I take all your past. I take all your illness. I take all of the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm willing to accept you as you are. Everything. And I'm going to give you everything. Not, I'm going to give as much as I desire until you annoy me. And then I get to hold stuff back. I will give you everything. Yeshua's proposal, when it was the Last Supper, he dropped down basically to one knee and he offered them and he said, this is the blood of the new covenant, right? Renewed covenant. And he offers them this cup. He's proposing. And the question you have to ask yourself at that time before you drink that cup is, will I take everything you are and give you everything that I am? Most cases people go, I will take everything you are and I will keep everything that is me. People want blessing, they don't want responsibility. People want the blessing or the joys of marriage without the responsibility of being married. It doesn't work that way. You want the oneness, the unity, you're the first person I see every morning and the last person I see every night. Well, guess what? You're going to bump heads. Guess what? You're going to have disagreements. Guess what? You're going to love them more deeply than you've loved anybody at any given time in your life. They're going to teach you to love, or you're going to grow in love in such a way you never knew how. But if they disagree with you with something, it doesn't mean you stop loving them. Love is the action word. You actively love out. If I stop loving you, that means I stop considering you. That means I stop doing things for you. That means I stop hugging you. That means I stop kissing you. That means I stop telling you I love you, or you're pretty, or you know what, I'm really glad you're here. If you stop loving, it's a choice. Listen to me carefully. People get into this rut and they go to counseling and they say, oh, well, I'm just not in love with her anymore. The question is, when did you stop? The reason you fell in love with each other was because you courted. You gave time, you gave your ears, you gave attention, you gave money, you gave everything so that you could spend 15 minutes, 2 hours with that person. And when you proposed and you were like, oh man, this is so exciting. I get to be a husband, I get to be a wife, I get to belong to that, right? And then you promise each other the world, standing in front of a pastor, standing in front of anybody, you're standing over there, I will love you forever. And then you have your argument. And then you forget what you promised. You see, that day was not where you promised stuff and then you get to pull them back. That day was what you promised that you would be like no matter what for eternity. Until I die, I will love you. Until I die, I will be your husband. Until I die, I'm lifting you up and I'm putting your needs above mine. Isn't that what you promised? So every day thereafter, from that day, is an opportunity to act that out. Opportunity. How then can I take this and I can reflect God's love through this intimate relationship? Well, let me point you back to your master. Let me point you back to Yeshua, your rabbi. He came in and he said, how did I act? He laid down his life for them. He lifted them up. He taught them. He was investing in them. He was loving them. He was building them. Did Yeshua ever turn around and say, bow down to me, it's about time? You know I'm king, right? So how are we supposed to act? By lifting up those around us, by lifting up our children, by lifting up our spouses. Last time I checked, it wasn't only the men that have to act like Yeshua. Ladies do. You mimic him, you build them, and your life stops, and you become now this vessel to which I will invest in you, I will love, and God will love through me to be able to show you that you're worth it.
Alice, don't you think in this culture of ours of instant everything, because everything has to be now, the gratification can only be delayed for 5 minutes, otherwise it's too long. Maybe the principle here about all of this is also that, you know, we've lost this perseverance thing and the consistency. So even in our relationship with Abba, if we don't get the Holy Spirit just filling us up with beautiful feelings after 5 minutes, we want to give up on that relationship. And it's the same with the marriage. If I don't get filled up with wonderful feelings about you all straight away, because now we've had an argument, I want to go to the CNA to get my divorce pack. Because we just haven't, we've just lost stamina, we've lost perseverance, we've lost consistency, we've lost the ability to do long term. And I think Abba's all about long term.
It's also very much becomes when we get married for selfish reasons, right? A lot of those cases is when someone has come in and they wanted something and they humiliated that person and they got what they wanted and it's all about them. Right? William?
This whole chapter is very interesting in regards to one of the tests the Pharisees put against Yeshua in that day.
Please pause.
Yeah.
You want to give me the scripture reference, brother?
I don't know the scripture reference, but yeah.
We'll discuss this now. First get into sanctity of marriage and then we get into the test, right? Are you guys with me on how important this is and what you should be doing, yes? Okay. What Willem brought up is very important. Sorry, buddy.
Just one question. Maybe you will cover it with what you're talking about now, but how do we deal with this in today's day and age? I mean, if I go stone somebody, I'll go to jail.
Unfortunately, what we're dealing with is, remember, when God pulled these people out, He put them at the base of a mountain, and now He reaffirms it sitting at the Jordan, those same stipulations, and He's going, I'm giving you a land. This is my rulings, my teachings of which you are going to govern. Remember, the only governance that they ever experienced for the last 400 and some odd years was Egypt. And now you're going to go into another place where they're governed separately and differently, but now it's fertility cults and all types of other things. And then He says, don't get mistaken here. Many of the mitzvahs or the instructions is to guard you against acting like Egypt and to guard you against acting like Canaanite. And if you look deeper enough, in many cases with Yeshua stuff, is to guard you to act like Greeks and Romans. Okay? So He will specifically mention something that was a pagan practice at the time, and He says, you don't act like that. But because we don't know the pagan practice, we miss it. For instance, give you a quick example, turning water into wine. That's nice. God likes a lot of booze, right? Because He didn't just make a little bottle, He made barrels.
Yeah.
So what are we saying? Wine is good. What else do you think that miracle is about?
Abundance of joy.
Okay? Wine means joy. He brought the best for last, and the bride's father, I believe it was very happy. Oh, the good stuff. What else? Sorry, Anza-Veronica.
Sorry, isn't that also a sign of the covenant between the man and the woman getting married, but also the covenant between Yeshua and us?
Not really a sign, but it's a sign of what was in it. Okay, so it's a feast and festival. If you're looking for Sinai covenant, the sign would have been the Sabbath. If you're looking at the renewed covenant, the sign is the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. Okay?
It's basically one of the other gods that have done that. So.
Right. Okay. So if we wanted to unpack it, God loves a marriage. His first public miracle, in a sense, is by reaffirming a Holy Communion, a wedding feast. Something that He would again reiterate and say, right, I'm going to come and fetch the bride of Christ, right, and there will be a wedding feast up in the clouds, yes? Okay? But there's also Dionysus. Now Dionysus was a Roman god, a Greek god, who was a little bit of he was a drunken fornicator, best description. Okay, go and do some research on this guy. And once a year, he was considered to turn, one of his miracles was turning water into wine. So he sends these guys out and he says, all right, now go into a pagan or Roman world, and then they go, oh, we're going to go to the temple of Dionysus party. You know, he turns water into wine, and then they go, I was there when God turned water into wine, and He wasn't sanctifying that. He was talking about a man and a woman becoming one flesh, as was stipulated in the Garden of Eden. Don't come here and tell me that that's God. He can turn 17,000 barrels of water into wine. Still, what you're telling me, the fruit of what I'm seeing with what they do with that wine, is not sanctifying God. But they're becoming drunk, and they're doing a whole bunch of other things that He told me not to do. You still don't understand, right? So He goes up, and when they're sitting at there, He comes and He brings this nation out, and He prepares them, and He says, okay, we're going to drive them all out, we're going to put you in land, we're going to get a Sanhedrin, we're going to get leaders, going to get your town council and everything sort of set up together later with the kingship of David and all the rest of it, and we will have prophets and all the rest of it, but that's your governing according to my statutes. Fast forward a little bit into Yeshua's time, Roman time. Okay? They were not permitted to carry out their sentence. Why? Only the Romans were allowed to kill you. If they weren't getting any joy out of it, they took it away from you. Sorry for you. Okay? They would control it. Okay, which is one of the tests that came up. Can anybody find a quick scripture reference of Yeshua and the adulterous woman? Who?
John 8 verse 1.
John 8 verse 1. Thank you. are we right? All right. Are we all there? All right, we're going to, not much for this. Unpacking some more. It says, but Joshua went to the Mount of Olives. At daybreak he appeared again in the temple court, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. Okay, as normal, as rabbis do. The Torah teachers and the Pharisees brought in a woman who had been caught committing adultery and made her stand in the center of the group. Then they said to him, Rabbi, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in our Torah, in the law of, what do you guys have there?
Moshe.
Torah of Moshe, which the Torah of Moshe gave us, commanded that such a woman be stoned to death. Just let me stop there. It is never ever, if you're getting to this idea that it's just the law of Moses, please stop. Go back and read Torah. It says, and God said, and God said, and God said. If you want to understand what Moses was in all of that, let me show you. This is Moses. Hello. That's all he is. A prophet utters the words spoken to him from God. God speaks, Moses reiterates. People listen. It was never the law of Moses, but law from God. If you want to understand, you go look at that, he will say, and God said, and God said, and God said. Nobody doesn't say, okay, that it came out and Moses came up with the law. It doesn't exist. Okay, so it's God's instruction. Okay, he says he commanded that such a woman be stoned to death. What do you say about it? They said this to trap him, so that they might have ground for bringing charges against him. They said this to trap him. They're using Torah to trap him. So obviously the context is skewed. How do I know this? Does God give you an instruction to trap you? No. James says he has given you a perfect law that gives freedom.
Yes.
Right. So if God's law gives freedom, God's instruction gives freedom, what are they using to try and trap him? They're perverting a law. They're trying to catch him out. Where else do we have an example of someone perverting law to try and catch someone out? Satan comes and he uses scripture, twists it slightly to pervert it to get Yeshua to slip. They are trying to get rid of him. They're trying to get him deaded. They don't want him around because he is causing a muck with their interpretation of what's going on. Okay? Yeah. But Yeshua bent down and began writing in the dust with his finger. When he came, when they kept questioning him, he straightened up and said, to the one of you who is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone. Then he bent down and he wrote in the dust again. On hearing this, they began to leave one by one, the older ones first, until he was left alone with the woman still there. Standing up, Yeshua said to her, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She said, no one, sir. Yeshua said, neither do I condemn you. Now go and don't sin anymore. Okay. So, they bring them to a rabbi. What's a rabbi? A teacher of what? Teacher of God's instructions. Okay? The term rabbi in those times was not a title, it was a term of endearment. Right? What does rabbi mean?
Exalted.
Exalted one. As in someone that God has taken and lifted them up and given them insight to understand certain things that we did not see. Okay? Someone who would be like reading Isaiah 53 and realize this was talking about the Messiah. We take it for granted that there was a messianic prophecy, but when he wrote it, he didn't understand that God was talking about Messiah. Right? So who came in and went, this is about the Mashiach, this can't be anybody else. What is going on here? This has to be Messiah. So God has given someone correct interpretation and insight to be able to talk about it, teach it, help them understand it. He gets lifted up as Rabbi. Okay? So they come up to him and they go, Rabbi. Now, in the portion we just read, where does it say, go and tell a rabbi that we found someone caught in adultery? First problem. Who were they supposed to take him to? Who? The elders? Would have taken them all up. Remember, you're sitting in Jerusalem, so who was running Jerusalem? The Sanhedrin. So you would go to a council. Alright. She was caught in the act of committing adultery. How many of you think you can commit adultery alone? So where's the other guy? So you bring one for me to condemn to death, number one, but you don't bring the other? Was it maybe one of you?
Yes.
Okay? You tell me she was caught in the act, but you don't give me the two people that were there. Again, not according to what we just read, right? So and then he takes them up and he sits there and he doesn't give them a basic answer of, okay, this is the problem. Come back to Frankie's thing. Romans said, you're not allowed to kill anybody, so let's stone them to death. If Rabbi said, all right, let's take them to the cliff and stone them, what do you think they would have done? Well, let's go tell the gods. He's causing a revolt. And they would kill him. You don't take the law into your own hands. I don't care whether you think it's righteous or not. Rome is God here. That was depicted in the coins that they minted. That was in the way they acted. If you went against Rome, you were killed slowly, painfully, and they enjoyed it. It was a well-oiled killing machine. Okay? But he doesn't do this. He looks at them and he goes, really? First you come here with me to Torah, then you want me to think I'm going to fall into the trap of the Romans? But he doesn't say a thing. He bends down and he starts writing in the dust. Now what's that about? You want to find that reference for me in Jeremiah? Let's read it.
Jeremiah what?
Just a portion with the dust. You've got to find it first. All right, I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay? So here he goes in and he says he writes in the dust, and there's a very interesting play in the Hebrew, right? Remember the first, what is the word for Hebrew for man? Adam. Trick question. Wrong. Snap. You've seen the phone. Ish is man. Right. For mankind, he uses the word Adam. Can you guys see that? Yes? You can see that, right? Okay. So he says Adam, and he made man from what? Which is? Adamah. In Hebrew. So which you will come from, the Adamah. Okay? So in a sense, okay, well, let me discuss creation and then I'll come back to it. What made dust you? Ruach, that came from God, His very breath, the Holy Spirit, created that. Okay, so you have the Word of God standing over there, and he bends down and he starts playing in the dust. And he goes, you who came from the very dust of the earth are trying to trap me. Okay? So I believe he's alluding to the very, don't forget who you are versus who I am. Did you find that version?
Yeah.
Jeremiah 17?
Verse 13.
Please read.
Okay. Hope of Israel, Adonai, all who abandon you will be ashamed. Those who leave you will be inscribed in the dust, because they have abandoned Adonai, the source of living water.
So he's writing their names in the dust.
Well, it doesn't say what he was writing. But remember, these were the Torah teachers of the time. They knew their word backwards. I believe it's a double play here. You who come from the dust want to challenge me. Number one, I was there from the very beginning. And then he challenges them then, and again, when Yeshua does something like this, he gives them an invitation to repent. He's not judging, he's calling them to stop, consider, and come back. And he says to them, you have abandoned me. You're living in it. At any given point. So at any given point, they could have stopped him and went, you know what, Rabbi, you're right. You know what you're saying is true. We can't condemn this person. We're trying to get rid of you. You who are being called a rabbi, exalted one, who keeps upholding the Torah, who establishes it, who lives it out perfectly. And you coming in here and you telling him, we're trying to trap you and get rid of you for what purpose? Because we don't like it when you show us up. Okay, it's getting a little deeper, right? He comes up again and then he writes, he sits down again, carries on writing with his finger, and then they all leave one by one. You have forsaken God. You guys have walked away from God, so you might as well walk away from this. Remember, there was a lot of hypocrisy going on in the time of Yeshua. Not all of them were hypocrites, but a lot of them were. And he sits down and he challenges them, and he challenges their interpretation, and he says, look, you don't even know what Torah is saying, and you want to come here and you want to challenge me. Who are you again? If you're the ones who are supposed to be teaching the standard, Torah teachers and Pharisees. Pharisees were so, the Hebrew word is dati, so pious, that they went extra lengths to keep God's instruction. And if they were the ones that are getting it wrong, someone who doesn't understand the word as much, what do you think is going to be the repercussion? Well, the Pharisees are doing it, and they know more than I do. So you people who are walking in this relationship with God, reflecting Him, understanding Him, wearing tzitzit, keeping the feast, doing these things, and people come to you and they look in your life and they look at your marriages and they look at your situations and they go, oh, well, you know God? What is He like? How do I please Him? If I do this, do you think it would be good? If I do that, is that okay? And you would have to give account because they're looking to you who have been studying, who know more. So where are you? And these guys leave one at a time. He says, you're not going to trap me. You are supposed to be using Torah to give life and freedom, and you're using it to try and cause my death. The Word of God, which is both the Torah, as well as someone who was put in flesh, who came to give life and set captives free. The instruction that gives freedom according to James. And you're using it to try and bring destruction? Do you misunderstand why I'm here? And then they all walk away. And he looks at them and he goes, where are your accusers? You see, you cannot condemn anybody to death unless you have 2 or 3 witnesses. Yes. And then they go, well, they're all gone. And he says, well, neither do I accuse you. He was not an eyewitness account, but this is God in flesh. Listen to what he says though. What was his parting words? No sin no more. He says, if you were nervous now because you were caught doing something that you shouldn't be doing, you better turn around and get back to God. Or else, remember, time and time again, he says, or else something worse is going to happen to you. He says, if you fear judgment from men, how much more so from God? Don't think because you can get away with it with man that you're going to get away with it with God. You know, I find it funny that people don't want men to find out, but they forget God's living in them, with them, watching them do something, and then they go, I got away with it. Yeah, that's probably going to come out. Or it's going to come out. Either way, you do it not. So he sits down and he comes down to them and he goes, and again, I love it. Even in these portions where he's taking them on, challenging them, he gives them a call to repentance in the midst of it. Don't forget where you came from.
What I find interesting about it is that he says, and the older guys left first.
Yeah.
So the guys that is supposed to know the most are the guys that first walked out because they realized.
Yeah. They've been snookered, eh?
There's another thing is another sin that they confess is with the husband is to cast the first stone.
Are you sure?
Or the first witness, the husband that reported the incident, or if the husband is reporting the incident, isn't he the one that cast the first stone?
It says the witnesses will.
Or the witnesses, or
Witnesses are the ones who do it.
My point is the witnesses.
Yes.
And by you asking him, you casting the first stone, which one of you are the witnesses?
Yes. And you know what the crazy thing is? Can you imagine?
You met them at their own ground.
Yeah. You have to be so sure. That's nice, eh? People advocate death penalty and things like that. I'm not going to get into that, whether I agree it's right or wrong. But people want to go, oh yes, death penalty, please take him and have him lethal injection and all the rest of it. Would it not be a little bit of a different story if you had to be the eyewitness and you had to be the one who pushed the button? Are you sure you saw what you saw? This person's life hangs in the balance. And if you're not 100% sure, remember, you're going to have to live with that decision for the rest of your life.
That's right.
Each one of these little mitzvahs, you see, it's almost like a check and balance, right? So you come in and you want to shame somebody, I'm holding you accountable to what you're saying. You want to come in and you want to advocate that this person did this and this person did this and this person did that, you better be sure of your facts before you open your mouth, because that could lead to death. And if you're wrong, you know, in Hebrew they call this Lashon Hara. It's called the evil inclination, the evil tongue. Okay? It's a term of saying, breaking someone down to the point of that they mean nothing to somebody else. So if I destroy someone's reputation, let me put it to you this way. Mark, because I can't pick on him, right? Mark, you know, I went to the shops and then he walked out the bottle store, you see, with a little brown bag. And I'm pretty sure there was liquor in it. In fact, I know there was straw rum. Has to be. And he goes in and he takes straw rum, you know, and obviously he wasn't going home. So I'm pretty sure he's got someone on the side, right?
The story just grew.
Yeah, no, because Rachel would never allow that. And, you know, so, I mean, obviously he's going to go and do something he shouldn't. And I'm talking to Mike, who just so happens to be, at this time, looking to Mark for counsel, or maybe Mike wants to give Mark a really nice job. But Mike's a God-fearing guy, and he listens to me. And then he stops and he goes, you know what? I don't know if I want that type of influence in my company. But maybe Mark had been praying a really long time to get a job. And this is God's answer to his prayer. But he doesn't get it because of what I said. How sure are you of what you saw? Could that have been a culprit? Depends on if you're studying the shadow. Could it have been anything else? Yes. Could he have been going home to his family? Possible. So how sure are you to be able to defame his reputation to the point where this person won't give him a job anymore over what you have seen as small testimony? And when it's found out that he was actually buying ginger ale for his beloved wife, who demanded that he needs to go out because she has like really bad acid indigestion and or tummy ache, and she needs ginger ale, and the only place that had it happened to be a bottle store. And him, by being a loving husband, went out to serve his wife, go into a place he doesn't agree with, to go buy something to help her, and I just happened to see the end of that story. We need to be very careful of what we let come out of our mouths, because that very thing could lead to a disruption not only in his physical in physical, so now Michael doesn't want to hang with him anymore because he believes he's a drunkard and he likes to rum and he doesn't want to talk to him, to the fact that it will also interrupt a spiritual prayer maybe when Mike's like, but God, you told me to hire Mark and I don't want Shura in my office. We have a tendency to break people down too quickly and we get involved in situations where that happens. Last thought, guys, excuse yourself from situations where you get in, where people come in and they say, oh, it's like this. Remember, each time these things come up, God says, investigate, hunt, ask the questions. And if there is one discrepancy, you can't hold them accountable. You cannot go into hold the death penalty. I'm a God of life. I want to set them free. But I'm also going to hold them accountable to what they say and what they do. If you do not hold your children accountable, what happens? Anybody been to the UK lately? All right, do yourself a favor. When you see 12-year-olds stealing police cars, you're not allowed to smack them. You're not allowed to lock them up. The Lord pats them on the back and said, don't do that, that was very naughty, and send them back home. I know. I have family that has stolen a police car. I wish I could be using a different example, but I know of the case. When parents get locked up for giving their children a hiding, when a 3-year-old throws a tantrum, and a parent goes up and smacks her bottom, that father got locked up, he got divorced, and his parental right was taken away forever by the courts. Because his child was being naughty, and he gave it a smack on the mouth. Now, what happens is, later you get these teenagers who walk around smacking women and men in the face, and they're not allowed to defend themselves because that's a minor. There's no accountability. So what happens when that person turns 18? Then it's assault, but they've never been held accountable in their life. Now all of a sudden you want to bring your law?
But no, court systems are based on when you swear an oath, you swear by the Bible.
Yes, but that doesn't mean we don't know how to nullify what God said to be able to appease our own conscience. What I'm saying to you is this. Scripture says if you love your child, discipline. God says don't spurn my discipline because I discipline you out of love. I want to teach you accountability. I want to teach you balance. I want to teach you that there is a check and balance, that you will eventually be held accountable for what you say and what you do. Whether you see it happen now right in front of you or it's going to happen when I come again. At the end of time, when I hold everybody accountable, they're going to be held accountable for what they say and what they do. You are not doing anybody any favors if you just sweep it under the rug and you say it's not going to happen. I tell you that Abba in these portions protect those who by previously have never been protected before. And He holds you to what you say and what you do in everything. Any questions, any thoughts? Your feet, pray time is happy time.
It's the last two.
You see,